The official Friday box office numbers for Captain Marvel are out, and it made around about $19 million. It made about $9 million in the Thursday box office, which is pretty much in line with what was expected, to around about double what Thursday was onto Friday. Saturday should make another 50% more than that, so it should make somewhere under 30 million. And then Sunday should make around about the same as what it did on Friday, again about 19 million, if it stays in line with what a lot of other films do. So Captain Marvel right now, I would say, is in trouble to beat Wonder Woman's box office total. So I know they've tried to build it up as being the best white woman superhero film ever, and it's better than Wonder Woman, or they just pretend Wonder Woman doesn't even exist. But I think right now, after these numbers, Wonder Woman will probably get a better box office total than Captain Marvel, but let's have a little look to see what I'm basing that on. The first thing here is a little anecdotal, but it's from the local multiplex near me. These are the actual attendances for these sessions. This cinema's got the sort of fancy seat area, and it's got the normal general admission area as well. On the fancy seat area, they've got pretty good turnout on Saturday for what actually happened. So again, these are actually taken after the movie officially started, which would be during the advertisements. So these aren't just sort of current purchases for tickets or pre-sales or anything like that. These are the actual purchase tickets that actually happened at this place. It's only one place, but gives you a good idea roughly what's going on. On the actual general admissions area, you can see only one session was fairly full, and that might not even be 50%. It's hard to judge, but I'd say it might be 40%. The rest of them are pretty terrible. So this anecdotal evidence, along with the official Friday numbers, is what I'm basing on that Captain Marvel has a really, really hard chance to actually beat Wonder Woman's US domestic total. Now, the actual worldwide box office, Captain Marvel might beat Wonder Woman because Captain Marvel's doing quite well internationally. Wonder Woman didn't do that fantastic internationally, so Captain Marvel may very well get a higher total world gross, but Captain Marvel, I think, might struggle to beat the US domestic total for the box office. And this is obviously not using inflation-adjusted totals. That wouldn't change Wonder Woman's total that much. It was only a few years ago, but all of these figures and graphs here are not inflation adjusted. I stated in a previous video that there was a chance that Captain Marvel could become the 5th biggest grossing film of all time, surpassing the $1.6 billion that Jurassic World made. There's absolutely no chance of that happening now. It's not going to get anywhere near $1.6 billion. Jurassic World is quite secure as the 5th biggest film of all time, non-inflation adjusted. Another two films that are good to judge against where Captain Marvel is at the moment are Black Panther and Star Wars Episode 8 Last Jedi. Captain Marvel was originally on track to perhaps beat the $1.3 billion that both of those films made, but now we can see it's died quite a bit, and there's really no chance at all that Captain Marvel will get to the $1.3 billion total. So somewhere under $1.3 billion is definitely what Captain Marvel will make. I think a lot less than that, but there's really no chance at all that it'll be able to surpass either Black Panther or Star Wars Episode 8. These graphs here show the US domestic totals. These aren't the world totals. The US domestic totals are just more accurate and a lot more transparent as to how the numbers work. So these aren't showing the actual totals themselves. Black Panther and Star Wars Episode 8 made about the same amount of money, but Black Panther had a much better US domestic total than Star Wars did. In fact, Black Panther had one of the best US domestic totals in history. I think it was around about number 4 or 5th biggest ever. It just didn't have a very good international total. It had 600 million it made in international money, which is very good, but it's not like top 10 or anything like that. In fact, I just noticed that Bohemian Rhapsody has made more money internationally than Black Panther, so it's made over $600 million. So another two good films to have a look at to compare are Iron Man 3 and Captain America Civil War. Iron Man 3 made around about 1.2 billion, and Civil War made around 1.1. And at this stage, they're both ahead of where Captain Marvel would be. The other reason that they're good to compare to is they have about the same percentage of money coming from overseas. So they're about 2/3 from overseas and 1/3 from the domestic US market, which is pretty much in line with what Captain Marvel's doing. So it's a very good indication as to where they will actually stack up worldwide compared to where Captain Marvel will probably end up. Suicide Squad is another good film to compare Captain Marvel to. Suicide Squad only, I use only in double quotes, it's a lot of money, but Suicide Squad only made $746 million. I think Captain Marvel will outdo that. It's going to be very bleak if that's all the total that Captain Marvel will make. but it's not that far in front of Suicide Squad at the moment. So when we look at the US domestic total on the graph, it's only about a day in front where the totals actually are, so or around about $15 or $20 million in front. So that's not that much. Suicide Squad died pretty quickly, and the film was no one liked the film basically. And so if Captain Marvel is the same, I know there's been a lot of negative press about Captain Marvel. There's also a lot of positive press about Captain Marvel. But it is possible that Captain Marvel could die to a similar extent to Suicide Squad, but it is a little bit in front of the money right now. So if it does, it means it's probably in line to make around about $800 million, which I think it'll probably do a bit better than that. But that's maybe the worst case scenario right now, $800 million for Captain Marvel. Now, another two good films to do a direct comparison with are Batman vs. Superman and Wonder Woman. Now, Batman vs. Superman made a total of $873 million. And Wonder Woman made a total of $820 million. But if you look at the US domestic proceeds, Batman vs. Superman made $330 million, while Wonder Woman made $412. I don't think at this stage, at least what I see of the evidence, that Captain Marvel can make $412 million in the US domestic market. So Captain Marvel may very well make more than $820 million worldwide. It might not, but I think it probably will. But I don't think you can make $400 million in the US domestic market, which will drag it down. Now you can see what the little percentages there on the right. 62.2% of Batman vs. Superman's money came from the foreign market, whereas only 49.8% of Wonder Woman's money came from the foreign market. So for whatever reason, Wonder Woman didn't have a very big appeal outside of the US domestic box office, similar to Black Panther, but it did do very well domestically. Which is not the case that Captain Marvel's doing. Captain Marvel is not doing great domestically, and I say that in quotes. It's doing really big numbers, but it's not doing top 10 numbers. It's not world-breaking numbers, but internationally it's doing very, very, very well. So the comparison between Batman vs. Superman and Captain Marvel is pretty close, and Batman vs. Superman had a better start. When we look at the chart, we can see that Captain Marvel is right in the middle of where Batman vs. Superman was at this stage and where Wonder Woman was. But Wonder Woman overtook Batman vs. Superman in the US domestic box office. So Batman vs. Superman died terribly, the reviews were awful, the film was terrible, and that's what happened after the first week. So a similar thing is happening to Captain Marvel right now. Will it be as bad as the Batman vs. Superman? It might. Batman vs. Superman is actually one of the worst examples you can actually notice of the drop-off. So it had an absolutely massive open, and then word got out, reviews got out, people didn't tell people to see the film, and obviously people didn't do a lot of repeat business. So I think that that's what will happen with Captain Marvel. I could be wrong, but I don't think Captain Marvel is a film that's worth seeing more than once. I don't think it's worth seeing once, but a lot of people have seen it once. I've seen it once. I just don't think there's anything there for a repeat business, and I think that's what will drive the money. So if people don't go and see Captain Marvel more than once, and word of mouth right now is very, well, it really depends who you listen to as to whether the film's good or not. There is very polarized opinions, whether it is the best film ever, there's a lot of 5-star reviews, or if it is a horrible, horrible, horrible corruption of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. So it's very polarizing. But yeah, I think at this stage, Wonder Woman's US domestic total will probably be better than what Captain Marvel does. But Captain Marvel is doing better than Wonder Woman did at this stage. And here on this last graph here, you can just see how difficult it is really to project what can happen. Wonder Woman had the worst start, the blue line, and it ended up grossing more money in the US domestic market than all of these other films here. Captain Marvel has got the second best start here, but it may continue on and become the best. It may become the worst. I still think it's probably going to make more money than Suicide Squad internationally, but there's a fair chance that it won't make more money than Batman vs. Superman, and there's a fair chance that it won't make more money than Wonder Woman did internationally, but I think it probably will. And the main rule of thumb that we can sort of project the numbers out to is that after the first week, generally films will make between an extra 50% or an extra 100%, depending on, well, basically whether the film's good or not. So Captain Marvel made a little bit less than $200 million domestically in the first week, and so that means it'll make somewhere around $300 million to $400 million domestically. It will only make $400 million if the film does very well compared to what most films do compared to the opening weekend, which is less than the $412 million that Wonder Woman made domestically. And if we look at the total worldwide, the official worldwide figure was, I think, $575 million for the first week, although it's kind of a week and a half for the international numbers. This is why the international numbers aren't great to use, because different films have different countries opening on different times. Captain Marvel, I think, had absolutely every country in the world opening around about Tuesday for America time. And so Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday is what the official box office weekend was for the international. I think Japan might not have opened then, but I think every other country did. So you got to put a little asterisk next to the worldwide weekend opening, because it was over basically an entire week, not a weekend. But if we go back to the so-called official week's total, which is a week and a half for some of the money, you got about $575 million. So if you take that up another 50%, you get roughly $850 million. So $850 million is probably the low end of what Captain Marvel will make if the film isn't considered to be very good. And again, I don't think it's very good, so I would say that's what's going to happen. I can be completely wrong. Furious 7 made $1.5 billion. I wouldn't rate that as a good film, so if someone was to ask me whether I thought Furious 7 could make $1.5 billion, I would have certainly said no. So, the same as I don't think Captain Marvel will make the upper end of its predictions. I could be wrong, but that's what I think. But if we go with the 100% over the actual box office total for the first week, again, if you double the the $575 million, you get about $1.1 billion. So roughly speaking, I think that's where it's safe to bet that Captain Marvel will make between $850 million and $1.1 billion, and I think it'll be on the lower end, under the 1.1. I could be wrong. If the film does exceptionally well compared to where it is right now, it'll make more than $1.1 billion. I just don't think that it will do exceptionally well. The film, no matter how you look at it, it's not a grand film. It's an origin story. I just don't think it'll have a lot of people watching it again, and people are desperate to see Endgame, so I don't know if they really want to go and see Captain Marvel over and over again before they get to the film that they really want to see. So just my personal opinion, but I would say 850 million box office total instead of 1.1 billion, but somewhere in the middle I think is very safe to say. Now, there's been some discussion on a lot of articles and on Twitter and so on that Captain Marvel needs $750 million to break even. And on the surface, I thought that was a crazy number, and it meant that they had to be wasting hundreds of millions of dollars somewhere. But no, it's actually pretty much spot on what it actually does need. So the film itself costs either $150 or $170 million. There's different figures out there about that. And then they've spent somewhere in the neighborhood of $170 to $250 million in marketing. It's a little bit vague exactly what they did, but most numbers point to over $350 million have been spent on the film and on marketing. And so they need to make $350 million to break even, but they don't get 100% of the money for all the ticket sales. So the first thing that happens is that every single different country has different negotiations as to what their territory will actually pay in royalties to the moviegoers. Buena Vista is the name of the Disney distribution company. That is not Marvel Studios. So Marvel Studios needs $350 million roughly to break even for this film. That doesn't mean Disney's only getting $350 million to break even. Disney's getting a bit of money through its distribution network as well. I don't know how they split that up. But Buena Vista will get some money, and after it's taken its cut, then Marvel Studios needs about $350 million to break even. Now, they get somewhere in the neighborhood of 60% for some territories, but other territories, the number's very vague to even find how much money they make per sale. So it's not easy to calculate how much money the film has to make, because it depends on what country the money is actually made in to determine how much money goes to Buena Vista and then how much obviously is then distributed back to Marvel Studios. So the figure is $750 million to break even. That's an estimate just based on roughly what they think they'll get in different countries. If they get a lot more money in China, for example, China may be more generous in how much money they pay in royalties, or they may be a lot less forgiving in how much they pay in royalties. So it really depends where the money is spread out as to how much they need. But anyway, $750 million. If they get roughly half of the $750 million, that means they'll get about $375 million. So if the film costs us $350 million, 375 would be a bit more than it. Some of the money goes to Buena Vista. There's your break-even point. So it's not broken even yet. As I said before, I think the film, sort of worst case, is around the 850 million mark. So yes, I think the film will be profitable. It should make at least $50 million. I think it could probably make hundreds of millions of dollars. but that's where the situation is. So the $750 million break-even number, that is an accurate number. That is actually what it has to make in box office proceeds, roughly, to break even. So I'm predicting that for Saturday, Captain Marvel should make under $30 million. It'll probably make something like $25 million. And it'll probably make somewhere under $20 million for Sunday. So roughly another $45 million for the rest of the weekend. And if it does that, that's roughly on par with where I'm saying the kind of money that it should make. But we'll see what happens on Saturday. We'll see what happens on Sunday. Thanks for listening, and I'll catch you next time.